Yay! All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming on and agreeing to do this. I'm super excited and happy to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'm super excited and happy to meet you as well.
So tell me a little bit about your story and kind of how you found cold exposure.
Um, about how long time flies? 7 years ago or so, I was getting bogged down with some of the stresses from my career, and I began having mental illness, and I was diagnosed with post traumatic stress, and I my after my mind was starting to turn, my body started to turn on itself, and I began getting a series of autoimmune diseases and inflammatory disorders. My beard started falling out,
Mm.
and I started getting really bad stomach attacks, like early onset diverticulitis or Crohn's disease. It runs rampant in my family, unfortunately. And I would get 10 out of 10 pain and be just debilitated. And then I started getting sick lots too, chest infections. And then I went to the doctors and trying to get help and counseling. I would just get prescribed pills like Ativans and Xanaxes, and those sort of just compounded the problem. Um, and then yeah, I just decided I needed to purge myself of um, any substances or negative thoughts. So I would just pile into the shower and hit the cold dial, and I found that would completely reboot my system, and it would. Like I said, not only alter my state, it would heighten my state, and I'd come out with control over my body, and as well as my mind and emotions as well. And so I started doing this probably for about 6 months to a year when a good friend of mine told me about Wim Hof. And from there, I looked into Wim Hof and did a lot of research on him. And all the studies, the endotoxin study at the time at Greybound University was a big one, where they were injected with a coli membrane that causes most people's immune systems to have a negative reaction and cause them to get fever-like symptoms, and he was able to repress or suppress that uh, innate immune response, the inflammatory response. And I realized that's what I essentially was doing with myself, well, for the previous time, um, by by as I like I said, that control over the mind and body, all the autoimmune disorders went away, right? So there, I saw there that what he was doing was similar to what I had done and the success that I had had. So I started implementing his breathing techniques, and then from there I went down the rabbit hole with all the various breathing techniques, his background in Tumo, um, and then not only him too. Like I was so taken by Wim, I didn't want to be uh, you know, uh, what's the word I'm looking for to be the guru effect, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah.
So I started looking into other science and scientists and studies that sort of backed the use of cold and breath as well, like or basically hermetic stresses. Essentially, I went down the rabbit hole with a lot of Dr. Rhonda Patrick's papers and studies, and some of her lectures and podcasts. And then in the last year or so, I've really taken up Andrew Huberman Lab, and then a lot of backing there with the research they're doing and hormetic stresses and whatnot. And then free diving as well. That's something I took up last October, and a lot of parallels in free diving as well, kind of learning to take top down neurological control over the limbic system and reptilian brain.
So tell me, like, the first time that you can remember having this thought or this idea, like, you know what, I'm just gonna go take a cold shower. Um, what was that very first experience like? The first one that you can remember?
Well, one really sticks out in particular, and that would have been up at my dad and my stepmom's cabin in Moose Lake, and it would have been this time of year. So it was probably about 2 or 3 degrees out, which I think Fahrenheit is maybe about 35
It's
degrees
cold.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I jumped into the water, and I only hung out for maybe about 10 to 30 seconds, and then I came out in my shorts, and I was comfortable to just sit on the step there outside while everybody was in their warm clothes and sitting around the fire. And for
Wow.
hours after that, I could just sit out there and be in complete control of my body's temperature, and as well as I mentioned, no negative thoughts, and a heightened state to go with it, like an exuberance, a feeling of euphoria alongside that. So that one in particular. And what's interesting about, as I mentioned, reading up on Dr. Rhonda Patrick, is a cold shock protein that's released called RBM3 is known to reattach damaged connections between neurons, the synapses. And so she mentions this for people that are predisposed or suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's, but it started triggering a lot of old memories and feelings from when I was younger as a child. And I remember being very young, a toddler, maybe about 3 or 4, and I used to get these horrible growing pains in my knees and all over my legs. So my mom would bring me a frozen bag of peas or a frozen bag of corn with the towel wrapped around it. And I remember I put it on my legs and I would just hug it. It was nearly the same size as me when I was that kid. And I was that age, and I would sleep with it at night. And it'd be, and after a little while, I would beg for it at night. I wouldn't go to bed without that frozen bag of peas and go to bed with me. And then also as a preteen, my mom used to send me out to Golden, BC on the Kicking Horse River, where my uncle was a river guide in the summer, and it's glacier water. And all summer, I'd be jumping in and out of that water. And again, that euphoria, like a deja vu of that heightened state when I was younger, but not so much putting together. And then playing hockey as a youngster as well, playing shinny out on the rink in the back. Temperatures would drop to -20, -30, and I would still be down in my t-shirt. And again, that familiar feeling, like Oprah calls it an aha moment,
Yeah.
but for me, it was more of a duh moment. Like, you've been doing this your whole life. Um, and so it's no surprise that intuition kind of drove me to take the plunge into the cold with all those experiences as a youngster.
So you said that was 6 or 7 years ago that you took your first cold shower, and then things have really just progressed since then.
Yeah, like since then, with all the backing of the science and the studies and the Wim Hof, it's a daily ritual for me. It's good medicine, and um, I might
Okay, so
take.
what does your daily Wim Hof practice look like? Do you like wake up and do it in the morning? Do you do like the Wim Hof breathing before you go to bed?
Um, you know what? I'm all over the map these days, to be honest, and it depends on the season. Where I live here, it drops down to really cold temperatures. And like for instance, today it's about +3 out. So again, about 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So I just kind of rolled out of bed this morning and I just put my shorts and my t-shirt on, and I walked about a half an hour to my favorite coffee shop and got a coffee. And uh, Since then, I mentioned that, Wim Hof was kind of like the first literature that I read backing a lot of this stuff, but I've also taken in The Oxygen Advantage, Patrick
Mm.
McEwen, as well as James Nestor's Breath,
Yeah.
and that book in there, and as well as with free diving. One of the exercises that they do, they call them apneic walks. And I find apneic walks for me work really well, especially out in the cold when I'm trying to wake myself up and get the blood flowing and get all those happy endogenous hormones flowing in the
So what do
blood.
you
So,
do on an apneic walk?
so I'll go out like a day like this where it's chilly, and I'll take a couple deep breaths in through my nose, like deep into the belly, and then just kind of anatomically release. Didn't do 3 or 4 of those, and then I'll anatomically empty my lungs, and I'll count my steps. And depending if I'm coming off night shifts, if I'm not feeling 100%, the first few rounds of those apneic walks, I might get to about 50 steps comfortably, and then from there I'll take a nice deep breath in, and then that's like the recovery breath. And then I'll take a couple regular recovery steps, get back into it, and do another round. And then I'll do another one, and I'll probably go to about 80 to 90 steps. And I find right around that 80 to 90 steps, that's kind of the optimal range for me. That's where I feel comfortable and really good. And as I'm doing these apneic walks, I can feel the back of my neck, sort of like in my brainstem area. I can feel it start to tingle, like
Mm.
this really nice feeling. And then when I take the breath in, I can feel it just radiate all through my body, like a warm wave, like an endorphin rush. And it's resetting all my blood gases, getting my carbon dioxide and oxygen and nitric oxide levels flowing, and putting me to a optimal state where I want to be. It's a great primer for me to begin my day.
So
I'll do
then
that.
you do like a retention or a breath hold on the exhale, and then you take your steps.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
I'll even comfortably breathe out as I'm walking, like
Oh, okay.
at a slow pace. I've learned from the Andrew Huberman podcast. As you're slowly breathing out, your diaphragm is raising up, and that's closing the ventricles and atriums in your heart a little bit, and then that sends a message through your phrenic nerve from your heart to your brain stem to slow down your heartbeat and to deregulate your nervous system to go parasympathetic. So as I lower my heartbeat, it allows me to hold my breath a lot longer and down regulate and feel good, be in rest and digest, especially coming off of night shifts. It's like putting your endocrine system, your hormones, through a milkshake.
Yeah.
So I found using those apneic walks out in the cold, it's really enabled me to quickly reset myself while I'm out getting my coffee in the morning. And I'll use those too in real time as well. Because you can't always lay down on your back and do Kundalini or Wim Hof
Right.
breaths or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Another thing that I use in real time that Andrew Huberman calls the physiological sigh is I'll take a deep breath in, hold, and then sip more air in.
Mm.
And what that does is you open up your lungs, the tidal volume expands, and that second sip in expands your alveoli, the little air sacs where gas exchange takes place. And then again, slowly exhale, because that brings the diaphragm up, closes the heart, and sends that message through your phrenic nerve from your heart to your brain to downregulate, to trigger your rest and digest system. So a lot of people, they run in a stress state with chronic stress, and that's no mystery to everybody. But one of the benefits of triggering your sympathetic nervous system is it's a real problem solver. Right? If you're getting chased down by a saber-toothed tiger centuries ago, in your actual environment, it's a problem solver. But within your body, it's a problem solver as well. It releases anti-inflammatory proteins, and it recruits killer T cells and B cells from your spleen and your thymus and cranks up your immune system, your adaptive immune system. Right? You've got your immune system works on three phases. You've got your exterior immune system, which is like your skin, the hair in your nose, mucus, and everything. That's your first layer of defense. Your second is your innate immune system, which is your blood platelets. So if you get cut, clotting, and an inflammatory response. That's what most people are run rampant with, an overactive innate immune system. And those studies at Raybound University, they repressed, they cut back that inflammatory response. And then that allows for the third step of the immune system, the third phase, the adaptive immune system, which are your white blood cells and your lymphocytes, your T cells and your B cells. And those are the ones that adapt to the actual pathogen or antigen that's invaded your body. And it gives them the ability to do what they were meant to do in the first place.
That is so interesting. So I'm curious then how you decided or it came to you that you were going to break the world record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, uh, as stars do, they tend to align from time to time. Right around the same time, I began this supplemental practice. I don't like calling it alternative because I'm a big fan of Western medicine as well. Like I would never deny the benefits that Western medicine has done for people. So this really works well with it. But I found altruistic practices,
Mm.
giving your time to help others, is really good for mental health as well, and that contributed to an increase in my well-being. So my fire department here in town, we have a department charity for people with muscular dystrophy, and it goes back to 1954. In Toronto, there was a gentleman who had two children with muscular dystrophy and was at his wit's end. So he went to this local fire hall, and the firefighters there began fundraising and campaigning for those kids with muscular dystrophy. And from there, it just snowballed into it being our national firefighting charity of choice. And what we do is the symptoms of muscular dystrophy are similar to the symptoms of the cold, being that you lose dexterity,
Mm.
muscles start turning into fat, and it's painful, among other things, and causes anxiety, similar to the cold. So, what we do is we have a rooftop camp out where we camp out on the top of Station 2, just down the street from me here, downtown Edmonton. And we do it right in the middle of February in a tent with our sleeping bags, and we stay out there until we raise a particular amount of money, whatever our goal is.
Wow.
That, and we've been doing it. Like our department has been doing it for well over a decade, and I'm not even sure how long, for quite a while. But I've been doing the rooftop camp boat. This will be my 7th year now, and I think maybe about 4 years ago, I talked to the chair of our charity, Courtney Polson, about putting up a plunge tank for when media comes up, just to kind of shake things up a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and incentivize the public to make donations and have sympathy for us. Again, we're out in the cold. And not only that, but like I love doing my plunges in the first place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, media came out one time, and I took the plunge, and they asked how long could I stay in, and I said, well, quite a while. So I think the first time I did about a half an hour
Mm.
for them, stayed in there, and then that kind of caught a bit of buzz, and then people kept coming up and asking me to do it. So that really complemented the rooftop camp out, doing these cold plunges with it, and then we began discussing the next year setting up like a full receptacle full of ice like the world record calls for.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan was to just do an hour because I did a half an hour the year before. But once I got in there, I got into that flow state and just started feeling so good. And We had a couple different breakfast television shows that were there at the time. And as my team was checking up on me, I said, I feel great. I can keep going. And I believe the world record at the time, an Austrian ice swimmer, Joseph Kubler, I'm probably saying his last name wrong, was about 2 hours and 8 minutes. And before you knew it, I was flying past that. And then,
Wow.
yeah, I got up to 2 hours and 20 minutes, and the year was 2020. So I figured that would be a good time to stop. So we pulled the plug then, and then that was back in February 2020.
Wow.
And then,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And then, so since then, Joseph came back and did 2 hours and 30 minutes, I think it was. And another gentleman from France did 2 hours and 35 minutes and like maybe 30 something seconds. So we started training again. That time we did it on the fly. So we didn't have the video evidence set up the way that Guinness wanted it set up. And then we didn't follow all their stipulations to a T. So for this last year, where we're going to do the rooftop camp out, we built a regulation Guinness ice capsule with all the diameters and everything that they wanted. And then February came along, and my sponsor at Columbia Ice donated a bunch of ice for us to do a test round in it, just for training and making sure everything worked properly. And we did it at my friend Courtney's garage. And yeah, we filled it up again. And again, we didn't have any intentions, but we did set up all the cameras to get the proper video evidence for Guinness. And I ended up doing 2 hours and 45 minutes there.
Wow.
So yeah, so I have that on memory stick. It's just a matter of sending it into Guinness. I've just been a little bit lazy, I guess. But we've used that video footage to make a few promo videos, and we're doing a 50-50 raffle for our charity Muscular Dystrophy again. And we're attaching that raffle to the end of those videos, and also as a way to promote the upcoming public event at Edmonton's Craft Beer Festival, where I'm going to attempt 3 hours to beat that record, my own personal best and
Yeah.
the current unofficial world record.
Cool. That is so exciting. So I'm curious, like, how do you decide and how do you feel and how do you like notice what's going on in the body? And you're like, okay, I know it's time to get out now. Like, what cues are you looking for?
My feet, my hands. Last thing I want is any tissue death there, right? Like I'm not going to take any unnecessary risks. And to be honest, like a guy can only do his best. And if I'm in there and an hour comes up and I'm not feeling it, I'll pull the plug. Like I'm not egotistically attached to this achievement so much. Maybe somewhat. I'm sure anybody is, like, to some degree. A little bit of ego is good for you, but too much will get you into trouble and get you making poor decisions. But yeah, and even if I only did do an hour, like that's still quite the feat. I mean, that's there's no shame in that. And again, like I said, so not to get away from your question, I want blood flow coming into my hands and my feet. And what I'll do is I'll do some belly breaths, fire breaths, and really heat up my core. Like I'll focus on one exact spot and start breathing in, and then get my chest and my stomach just cooking hot. And then from there, I'll dilate my vision, kind of go into a panoramic view, and then slow my exhales. And then that allows me to distribute the heat that I've created in my core into my extremities and
Mm-hmm.
get blood flow into them and kind of get that spread. You know, as I mentioned during those apneic walks, I start to get like a tingling feeling in the back of my neck. And then from there, I distribute that feeling, that endorphin wave of heat and uh, natural opiates into the body and all over to the fingers, into the hands. And so I'll just kind of go back and forth between there, like kind of like a wave between sympathetic and parasympathetic system, and it's just a bit of a balancing act, I suppose you could call it.
Okay, so you're really like you're really tuned in, you're really dialed in, and you're practicing your breath work like the whole time, it sounds like.
A good part of it. I'll those are sort of the extremes in between.
Okay.
From what if I can feel my core getting cold, as I mentioned, those fire breaths, and then enabling that heat and warm blood to flow to the extremities is sort of an slow exhale, even like maybe a little bit, just a slight breath hold with empty lungs, because that up regulates carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide opens up your arteries and capillaries and allows that blood to flow into there. And then in between there, I'll do sort of box breathing, maybe about uh, 4 seconds in and then 10 seconds out, just to be as comfortable as possible. And you go through periods of bliss and extreme terror while
Mm.
you're in there. So,
Can you
um,
talk more about that and just tell me kind of the the roller coaster that the mind goes through?
yeah, well, it's I'm sure you've done ice baths. I saw on your site, right? So you know the
Yeah.
feeling when you first get in, right? And it's nothing new. It's just an intense reptilian reaction that you know from the rational part of your brain, the frontal part, that you're in control. It's just that spasm of the mind, if you will, that's kind of got away on itself. So you almost have to be the observer of it and kind of step outside of it, and not let it get away with you, right? That's why like using these techniques outside of the cold is so beneficial in an analog sense, because it's like weightlifting for the well-being essentially,
Mm.
and it gives you control over your reactions and builds a wedge into your anatomic nervous system, which is a bit of a misnomer, because anatomic um, insinuates that you don't have control over those systems of your body, right? Which has been proven to be not true. You do actually have access to them, and you do have control over them.
So it sounds like really the breath work is it's it for you. Now,
Yeah,
do
the
you
breath.
ever get to the point where you're able to just like enjoy the ice party?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. So you're tapping into your dopamine network. To dopamine's cushioning the stress response, right? So a few really good triggers for dopamine is teamwork, right? So I've got all my team there, and good people. Everybody's helping out. They're there for me. They've helped get the ice in, right? So that's a big dopamine release. Another dopamine hack is setting small goals within the big goal. So I
Mhm.
never look at it like, oh, I'm going to do an hour. I'm going to do 2 hours. I'll be like, oh, like I'll put my music on, and I'll be like, well, this Beatles song, it's about 5 minutes. I'll be like, well, I love this song. Let's enjoy it. And then it's done. I'm like, yeah, I did it. Then there's a little bit of a dopamine release there, which works as a painkiller and cushions that cortisol and adrenaline, like when it's building up too high, right? Another thing is humor, right? So if you can throw a couple beaks or a couple jokes at your teammate and get people laughing, or think of something funny, like that's another good hack that you can use while you're in there, just for anything that you're doing that's stressful that you need to get through, right? Like you can utilize those tools in any walk of life, doing anything that's challenging.
Yeah. I would love to talk more about that because that's actually just the integration factor is why I'm even doing any of the things that I'm doing now. Um,
Yeah,
is like, okay, I can sit in a tub of ice and I can do this really hard thing, but am I able to recreate this, longer time in between the stimulus and the response in the other areas of my life that are really important as well? Like if I'm a parent or at work or, driving down the road and instead of getting road rage, just being like, all right, well, that just happened and I'm just going to observe this process. So
Yeah.
tell me more about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you wanna practice what you preach. You're putting all this work in the ice. You want to use it in other aspects of life too. So um, a big part of it is time perception. Uh, when you're getting stressed, time slows down, right? So what you're doing is when you get into the ice, is you're slowing your exhale. You're like a lot of people don't know this, but a little hack is you're going into panoramic view rather than focusing on one thing. That really helps too. So like when I'm at a traffic light, for instance, and the timer's going down, and I gotta pick up my speed, that stress response kicks in. So I'll engage that same down regulation with regards to getting across the street in time. So I'll still sprint across there, but the perception of time slowing down is kind of, I'm taking back control of it, as well as in a road rage situation. I just started an Instagram account for leading up to this event, and like my screen time on my phone has doubled, and I find myself reaching for the phone all the time. And the first few nights that I had it, it was affecting my sleep.
Hmm.
So that was a great opportunity to use this new I guess not only called addiction, but new infatuation.
Hmm.
And rather than let it get the best of me, when I feel like I need to grab my phone, that impulse coming to like, what's coming up? What's the next notification? I'll down regulate, right? So slow the breath, be like, no, I don't need to check the phone. This is mindfulness time. Um, Same with, yeah, somebody at work
It's
or
such a
like,
great example too, because I think that's something that we can all relate to is just like continually going, and grabbing and like checking our, like, we're not even checking for anything. It's just this
mhm,
habit. It's this program that we do all of the time, and a way for us to just find some more mindful moments there.
absolutely. It's impulse too. And
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of fasting. Uh, Again, that's top down neurological control. So I like to do a 5 day fast about a month before one of these challenges. And again,
Ah, okay.
it in, and rather than succumbing to that impulsive appetite, uh, I just, again, I down regulate, slow the exhales, and control that primal impulse. And it's just another dimension of top down neurological control. I think abstaining is another good example, a tool that people can use for that. With lots of people get caught up with an addiction with pornography and whatnot, and then that's like a huge epidemic that people don't like talking about as much. But that's another great example of controlling top down neurological control, just like in the ice bath, just down regulating those reptilian or limbic impulses and taking back neurological control from the top down. um, Fight or flight, like Wim Hof talks about the 5 F's: fight, flight, food, freeze, and reproduction. Pardon my French. Those are all examples of primal drives that you can take back control of by controlling your breath. And it's a feeling. Once you get like, you can talk about breath work and all these little hacks, things that you can do with your eyes, panoramic view. But it's a response. Like an example I like to give to people is, when you go to the doctor and he hits your knee like that and it
Mm-hmm.
kicks up like that, those deeper parts of the brain that we're learning to control, our ancestors did have control over them, and that's how they were able to conquer the globe before there was internal combustion engines. But people these days, we're in a comfort zone society, so those parts of the brain aren't used anymore, and they've become stagnant, right? So what we do is we do breath, we do cold, but normally people can't use that leg anymore, use that part of the brain. So you keep doing it, keep stimulating it, until before you know it, you have complete control back, right? And it's a feeling. It's difficult to put into words the neural circuitry that's going through your brain to those muscles to do it, but it's the same sort of reaction, right? Like that part of the brain, it's not proactive like your reasoning part of the brain, like your inner critic, like that little inner voice that never shuts up. You need to stimulate it by using some of these primal tools that our ancestors would have been exposed to on a regular basis, is the way that I look at it.
Very cool. Yeah, I love fasting as well. I'm actually on, I think I'm on day 3 of a fast today.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Yeah, thanks.
I find that's usually the toughest day is day 3. It gets a little bit easier after day 4 and
Yeah,
5
day
is.
threes and fours are usually challenging for me, and then after that, things are smooth sailing.
Yeah. Yeah. How long?
Now, so doing cold exposure while fasting, it always is really hard for me, of course, to warm up.
Yeah.
But so tell me kind of like, do you have a particular diet that you follow maybe the couple of weeks leading up to one of these challenges?
Yeah. So I listened to a podcast a while back with Dr. Ronza Patrick and a scientist from Italy named Vitor Longo. He runs the Longevity Institute out of California, I believe. And they were talking about 5-day fasts and some of the physiological benefits that happen, and the systems that come into play. And they were talking about on day 4 and day 5, you start engaging uh, hemopoietic stem cells, I believe is what they called it. And then once you start to refeed yourself again after, it really triggers that flush. It's like giving yourself a stem cell injection.
Mm,
So I sort of theoretically, there's no proof or evidence that this proves anything, but you want to enrich your white fat cells with mitochondria and transform them into brown adipose fat. That's what warms you back up again, is your brown fat. It's mitochondria enriched fat cells, and the mitochondria gives it a bit of a copper or a brown tinge, and that's why they call it brown fat. So I find after coming out of these 5-day fasts, it's like I have another gear. I can stay in the cold a lot longer, a lot more comfortably. I don't know. Maybe it's just the placebo effect. Maybe it's just because I've been in a state of top down neurological control for 5 days, and I have that much more control over my body and mind. Or maybe I'm using those stem cells that my body's generated to enrich my white cells and create more brown fat out of it as well. I'm not sure what it is, but it works great for me. I think doing a 5-day fast, it's not something you just do overnight. You need to build yourself up and adapt your body into it over time. Another thing is you're training yourself to be keto adapted as well. And when you're in cold for that long, you want to use every available fuel source that you have. So um, adapting your body to use the fat that you have as a fuel source more efficiently is beneficial as well. I try to cut back on meat. I'll do lots of vegetables, maybe
okay.
about
Why is that?
I don't know, it just works well for me for
Okay.
whatever reason. I get lots of energy from lots of vegetables, lots of diverse vegetables. I find if I cut meat out for a few days, I become ravenous for it. Like I'll come
Mm.
into work and they're cooking steaks, and I'm just like, oh, something's telling me that my body needs it still.
Oh.
So I'll stay away from processed meats and any nitrates or anything like that, because they can have a negative effect on the genes and mutations. And I'll so it's a real treat for me when I do indulge and have like a steak or something like that, or a wild salmon. I'll do something along those lines. I try to stay healthy or more organic when it comes to that. Coming out of a fast, I like doing a broth.
Yeah.
So day 4 into my 5-day fast, I'll start. I'll get a maybe an organic chicken raised without any antibiotics, and start boiling it. And from some of the research I've done, if you want to make the collagen in that broth more bioavailable, you want to boil it for at least 12 hours, which I like the smell of that broth cooking, especially when I'm 5 days into that fast. It really yeah. And then I'll lightly start refeeding again. I'll start with just a cup of the broth, And then I won't have any of the meat from the broth, but I'll just put a bunch of vegetables into that broth.
Mm.
Yeah. I find if you're being disciplined and following any dietary regime, but I think just the act of being disciplined goes a really long way. Whether you're doing the carnivore diet or going vegan or whatever it is, like sticking to your guns and setting goals and
Yeah.
sticking to them, that's reward in itself. I don't know if like if me having like 5%, 10% meat in my diet leading up to these events makes a difference, or if it's just the discipline of doing it.
Something
That
very rewarding about that for
Yeah,
sure. The
yeah.
longest fast that I've done so far has been 15 days.
Ooh, wow.
And I want to do a 30-day one.
Yeah,
Hopefully this year. Maybe it'll be this fast. I don't know. We'll see.
yeah.
But yeah, I actually love it when people are like, oh, I went to this restaurant and I, ate this thing, and it's like food porn for me, like when I'm fasting.
I agree. I agree. Like that smell in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You're really tapping into your dopamine network by visualizing what you're about to eat. Sometimes, when I'm into these fasts, I feel like I'm enjoying the food more before I eat it than when I actually do eat it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
There's Dr. Rhonda Patrick. I listened to a podcast. She had a retired scientist from NASA named Richard Cronise, and he's in Tim Ferriss's book, the what the heck? Which one of his books is it? The 40-hour work week or whatever. He has a
Mhm.
chapter dedicated to him, and he came out of NASA a little bit overweight, and so he started using cold therapy. This was like another. I wanted to get away from the guru effect of whim, so this
Mhm.
was like another wise person using cold and having all this data and analysis to back it and showing that it worked well. But when he did his second podcast with Dr. Rondra, he was like 15 days into his fast while he was on there, and he was saying that he would actually go to cooking classes and just sit at the back and watch people cooking because, like you said, it's food porn.
Wow.
So yeah, I find that interesting.
Well, I'm happy to hear it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what else? What else do you want to share, or should we know about your upcoming adventure?
Heat. I love heat too. I love, like, as a firefighter, I think every firefighter should have a heat conditioning regime, because I find it doesn't matter how fit I am. If my body isn't adapted to the heat, once I'm in a structure fire, like, you succumb to that heat so quickly. And not only that, there's so many benefits to sauna and to heat exposure as well. Um, I usually tell people if they're doing sauna practice, the idea is to do about 20 to 30 minutes from a lot of the research that I've done, with the last 5 to 7 minutes being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
That's when your body's releasing a lot of the heat shock proteins. One in particular is called diamorphine, and what it is, it's morphine, or an endorphin antagonist. So it bonds to your opiate receptors, but it has the opposite effect of opium. That's what's making you feel uncomfortable. That's what's making you want to get out. And what it does is it resensitizes those receptors. So the next time you're doing something pleasurable, it's that much more pleasurable and you enjoy it that much more. That's where the mood boosting benefits come from with that, as well as FOXO3, which gives back three-dimensional shape to your cells that have degraded over time from oxidative stress. It releases norepinephrine. There's a lot of parallels between the heat and the cold, and I'm as regimented about my heat practice as I am my cold practice as well.
Okay, tell me more about that.
It's fire, ice, and everything nice. What I'll do is I will keep the cold and the heat separate for the most part, probably about 5 days of the week. I'll do my heat and I'll come out. I'll let my body cool itself down after. I'll lay down on my back and almost do like a vasanyama, or just be in a really heightened bliss state. I'll even do some Wim Hof breathing or Kundalini breathing after I get out. I'll let my body cool itself down. And again, with the cold too, a big adapt or triggering of the adaptations to cold response is after you get out of the cold and you feel that jittery feeling, a little bit of an after drop. That's when your body is releasing the modulator to tell your body to create more brown adipose fat and condition your cardiovascular tree to make it more efficient at distributing warm blood throughout it. And then maybe once or twice a week, that's when I'll combine the two. I'll go hot, cold, back and forth, a regime between the two. And then that puts me into a very, very bliss, almost psychedelic state. I find it's a real dimethyltryptamine release.
Hmm.
Getting out of the cold, going into the heat, getting out of the heat, going into the cold. A lot of these practices, you don't do them by yourself. Always do them with a friend, with the spot. Don't do the breathing near the water or while you're driving. Even the apneic walks too. It's safer to do with a friend, right? Because all it takes is one person to do something silly and hurt themselves, and that's going to repel thousands of people from
Right.
reaping the benefits of the heat and the cold, right? And that's what it's about. It's first you heal yourself and you feel so great, but it's difficult to express the power of the mind, the heightened mindset, the state of well-being that you have. So in order to share that with other people, you can't be doing reckless things and endangering yourself. It's all bit by bit, um, strategic progression in the heat, in the cold, with the fasting, with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that note. That's really important. And, just kind of another, I always say, when we get together for these fire and ice retreats or, the ice baths or like they're a really great excuse for us to come together. And
Yeah,
really, at the end of the day, like it's this awesome community that you have of people that are breathing together and doing cold exposure and doing heat exposure or whatever it is. And the community is just, we're an ultra social species. So
absolutely.
ultimately, that's the thing that we're living for.
Yeah, yeah. Very tribal. It
Yeah.
connects us with our ancestors and builds bonds that are very difficult to build in the current society, the way that it's set up these days. You start releasing traumas, you start having insights that you never knew you had, and you bond like you never bonded before. And all this stuff is great, and it's great for the soul, it's great for the mind, it's great for the body, the heat, the cold, the fasting, all these hermetic stresses that we're talking about. But nothing beats brotherhood and sisterhood and coming together as a community, and being able to trust the people around you and knowing that you can trust fall into any one of them if you need to, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a complete pleasure. I'd love to come down to Nebraska and partake in one of your retreats sometime. Once,
I'm in Oklahoma. If you want to make it down for the November one, I have a ticket with your name on it. We would love to have you.
oh, lovely, lovely. Well, I'll
Yeah,
check the schedule. I'm not. Are borders open? Are you allowed to fly into the states right now?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think so.
Hard to say. I think world's not completely back to normal yet. There's
Yeah,
still, yeah, but yeah, eventually I would love to make my way down there to Oklahoma.
I'd be happy to have you.
And vice versa. If you ever want to come up to Alberta, to the gateway to the north, we'd love to have you.
Heck yeah, I'd love to come. All right, thank you.
Thank you.